was reading and I found a survey, a research from Dr. Gail Matthews, a psychology professor at Dominican University in California, that did a study on goal setting with 267 participants. And what she found out was that you are 42% more likely to achieve your goals just by writing them down. Another study shows that people who very vividly describe or picture their goals are anywhere from 1.2 to 1.4 times more likely to successfully accomplish their goals. And this, to be honest, is a habit I picked up 4 years ago. It was my other brother who told me about the study of like, oh, people are more likely to be successful at something or accomplish their goals if they write it down. So that was something I started doing of like, okay, it's one thing for you to have in your mind, oh, I want to, do this thing or I want to, be this thing. But when you write it down, like there's a lot more that comes with it. And I'm going to explain further about that. Is number one, it's going to force you to clarify what you want. Like you can't go on a trip or you can't travel somewhere with no destination, right? So like you have to know where you're going to before you plan how to get there. So getting yourself to write things down, like gets you to think about, okay, what is it I clearly want, like trying to be specific of like, okay, this and this and this is what I want to do. And so that helps you clarify it to yourself and also hold yourself accountable. Something else is it's going to motivate you to take action. And something I think about is the principle of out of sight, out of mind. Why that doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, but I do think it's a common thing of like, if it's very different if I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to do something, and there's a difference between if it's, let's say, on my fridge and I wake up and see it every day or something like that, like, it's always in your face. So like you're always remembering and always thinking about it or always subconsciously striving to it, even if it's not at the top of your mind every day. Something else is it would enable you to see and celebrate your progress. And so it's a thing of looking back on like, goals you've accomplished and, getting motivation to keep on with your journey. Because if you write them down, you're like, oh, I've done this. I, did well in this class as I wanted to. So now, maybe that motivates me to do well in another class. I also want to do well in a future class. So like your past goals that you've accomplished that you wrote down, would help you motivate and just, help you celebrate your wins and success. And lastly, it's going to provide a filter for other opportunities. In the sense of as you, grow older in life and you become, just as you grow older in life, you become more successful and then you then get more opportunities. So it's like, oh, if you got admission in, let's say, two different universities, for instance, right? Or multiple universities, right? Let's just use that as an example. If you have a list of goals and like you can use that to like evaluate the opportunities of like, okay, what will this university give me that, ties directly to what my goal is? And what is this other university giving me that's tying to my goal? And then you can make a decision based off of that from opportunities of like, okay, this one would give me this, but this one doesn't give me this. And okay, well, maybe this is a better one to go with. That's sort of like just all I had. I would be happy to open this up to questions. So it's an interactive session. It's not just me talking through the whole time. If anyone has questions, it could be about what I've said, about my experience. It could just even be anything random. Also.
The last part of it, which is like writing your goals down, and I think that's very essential. And I know because a lot of us are dreamers, right? So it's easy to dream up an idea of what we want to be, and then dream up another one tomorrow, and dream up another one the next, and you get caught up in the cycle of dreaming, and because you don't have a well documented sort of goal or route, a good starting point in my book to always write out those goals that you set for yourself, and then
In this video,
at
we'll show
least you
you how
can
to set up
see
advanced
them, and then you
personalized
can
themes in
find
YouTube
ways
Live
to
Tutorials.
sort of achieve them, and yeah, And I think that's very strong. I mean, if anyone has questions, I have mine, but let's see if other people have questions before I ask mine.
Sounds good.
Samuel, I see your microphone is not muted. So what do you have as a question? Samuel, I can hear you. I can see you. You can ask your question. He just muted his microphone just to not ask a question. That's funny. That's very funny. If you want to ask a question, all you just have to do is you can click on the microphone button on your screen and then unmute yourself for the moment when you're asking the question, and then let have I.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, it's like she has a presentation
Yeah,
with
very clearly.
I think
Clearly.
Aisha.
Yeah,
Aisha,
yeah,
What?
yeah.
you
She
have a
just did. She
presentation
said
for
that was
us.
a presentation.
Hello.
Yes, I presented without sharing the screen. I was just talking about the factors to consider and setting goals.
Okay, no problem. Okay.
Also sometimes I was going to say
So
if
my
you don't feel
question,
comfortable, okay. I was gonna say they
you
could
can
also
type
put
in
in
the
the
questions,
questions
right?
on the on the chat box if that
Yeah,
helps.
yeah. I think. But here's my question. Here's my question, right? And the question is sort of a question a student asked me a while back, and he's also studying, I think, computer engineer. I don't know which part, which particular aspect of computer science he's studying, but he was asking me a question about practicality of what he's studying. So he goes, he's studying computer science, and it wasn't more of a question, but I want to throw it to you because it's a different climb, and maybe there's a different experience from your end. And he was asking about how does he sort of, because computer science, the technology is evolving every now and then, so you're learning, and then the next 6 months there's a new technology or there's a new approach to solving the problems that computer scientists solve. And so how do you keep up with that, the constant change in the knowledge stream, let me put it that way, or the constant change in what you need to learn or what you need to know as a computer scientist? How do you balance that with studying the clinic? I mean, like, is there like how did you do it? How did you do it basically?
That's a good question, and that's a really good point of that computer science is a niche
How
that
do you how do you
keeps
balance
ever growing and evolving and just
that?
changing in general. And my advice would be
Like, is there like
I guess it depends on what point on your career
how
you're
did
in.
you
Like
do it?
if
How did you
you're
do it
going
basically?
to college, like chances are they're going to teach you the same thing, or whatever is available, whatever the college is teaching at that time. So learn that, grasp that as much as you can. And then afterwards, something else I would also like to encourage is learning on your own through e-learning. Like we have so many platforms now. We
True.
have Udacity, Udemy, we have like there's so many of them. You can get online courses,
True.
and then you can still there are still tons of Java developers useful, even though the industry is moving to Kotlin. So I think one thing is to keep your ear out and it's like, okay, now I know the industry is moving to Kotlin, but I'm already doing Java. Like keep doing the work you're doing in Java, right? If you're working for a company, you're employed at that. If they do want to move to Kotlin, or even if they don't on your own, you can then start learning about Kotlin on the side of like, okay, after work, I want to take this online class and then learn about Kotlin and just, sort of like get myself this security blanket of in case Java becomes deprecated or like, people no longer use Java now. I know the next thing you're moving to and process. At that point, it's just trying to evaluate like what are the big things and what do you think is actually here to stay. So that's actually research that
Yeah,
will need to
true.
be done. And I would say, yeah, yeah. And
On a
it's also kind of like just the spirit of it
constant
of
basis.
um
Yeah.
you're just
Yeah.
gonna be a lifelong learner and that's it's typically a good thing, but I can understand it can get tiring, to keep relearning a new thing and a new thing. But otherwise, if you're doing the same thing or you're using the same tools, doing the same work, like for 5 years, 10 years, like chances are you won't even enjoy it anymore, right? Or you get bored of it, or you are looking for more adventure, right? So I
Sure.
think the way it works out is not so often that it's burning out, but it's probably, a more timely thing where it's like, oh, I've been using this tool for a while now. The industry is moving to Kotlin. Like, okay, cool. I'll hop on, hop on that wagon.
All right, so I think we have a couple of questions on, and let me just do a quick recap so that people don't think we're just all talking about computer science. So this can also be applied to other aspects of study. So say what you study in class, whether in university, college, as the case may be, whatever in whatever capacity that you're learning, it is imperative that you continue to research so that you are on the loop, or sorry, in the loop on all of the new learning opportunities that presents itself, whether it's engineering, whether it's law, whether it's arts, whether it's any field needs that constant learning that you have to do so that you don't get cut out of what's happening in the industry. And it's the best way that you can improve yourself and present yourself with what's it called, hireable skills, or what's the word for it? Yeah, skills that people that need to hire you would find quite interesting. So some questions here. Abdul Fattah said that so it's putting down goals is good and all, but how do we condition ourselves to be disciplined enough to follow them and work towards them? That's the question. I
That's
want
a
you to answer that, and maybe I'll chip in some of my data.
so- okay, sounds good. That's a great question of like, you can write down the goals, but if you don't do the work, then that's all it's gonna be like written down goals on the paper. And to be honest, I think this is something I personally struggle with in terms of like losing sight of like setting goals. Because the way I have my own goal sheet is like, I have personal goals, I have like financial goals, I have like goals in terms of dean, I have like, different categories. And at times, it's difficult to like keep doing like, keep meeting up with all the goals like in all areas. So at times like, the dean goals like takes preference for doing good at that, and I'm not doing well with the financial ones. Honestly, one advice I could give is maybe if you have a trusted friend, if it's a sibling, if it's a parent, having someone hold you accountable to those goals. If you have someone you can talk to of like, hey, I'm trying to, for instance, stop drinking soda every day or something like that, like hold me accountable, like, try to, check in on that and keep me accountable. But honestly, like in the long run, it's something you yourself will just have to decide to keep up with, right? Like you're probably not gonna have someone
Yeah.
always constantly reminding you or helping you achieve your goals. Like that's something that's on you. Um, and conditioning yourself to be disciplined enough, I would say like Rome wasn't built in a day, right? If you have a bunch of goals and all that and you're finding it difficult to again sort of like keep balance with all of them, maybe start by focusing on one, right? So like one goal you want to do, and then keep at it. Like every morning, have try to form a routine of like doing something that supports directly supports that goal every day,
That you
right?
have,
Or
yeah,
depending on the
that's
goal,
true.
it might be something you do every week or every month, right? Not all goals are necessarily things you can do on a daily basis. But I think like if you're finding it difficult to like just start or finding somewhere to start, then I think you can start off from just one goal, like focus on one specific thing. And then when you can kind of get the groove in that, you can then add up more goals and then work on those simultaneously.
Okay, that's true. That's correct. So yeah, Rashid, here's something also that I think might help. So writing down the goals isn't sort of like a strict. So usually, how I like to look at it is this, and this is what overwhelms a lot of people. So you've written down this bunch of goals, and then you start to think that I have to hit up 100% on everything so that I feel good about myself, and that's setting yourself up for failure, because the human nature is that because you won't get all of it done. You won't be able to do it 100%. The idea is to make it upon yourself. For example, maybe you have set up goals, and I have it outlined, and definitely I'm going to maybe falter a little bit. You give yourself attainable goals, right? Don't set a goal that says I want to build a skyscraper in 7 days. That's unattainable, right? Goals that you feel that even as much as you falter, you can hit up as much as you can. So, and even if you hit them up maybe 10% or 15% of the time, or 20%, or even if you try as much, what happens is there's an exponential curve that goes on with that. So you try the first day 10%, the next day you're going to want to be better than the first day. So you go say maybe 11%. It's a gradual process. It's a climb, right? And there are times when you're going to be climbing high. There's times when you're going to hit a plateau. There are times when you have to climb again, and it's that constant changing approach to it that helps you to realize that to help you to like sort of balance the expectation with the reality of things. So it's a goal just for you to be accountable to yourself. And then she mentioned also that you need to find an accountability partner, so someone who holds you responsible to your actions. And maybe you're lucky enough to find that, but if you can find that, it makes it easier for you to the person then is able to tell you when you maybe veered a little bit away from what you were expected to do. But the point I'm driving at is set attainable goals. And you know yourself that you've set goals that is attainable for yourself, and then start to gradually work towards achieving them. I don't like even like an example. If you set a goal to quit drinking soda, I wouldn't expect you to tell me that in the next 1 week I'm off soda. You can start with like, okay, maybe I'm used to taking like 2 bottles a day. Maybe I'll try and take one, and then hold yourself accountable to that, and gradually see how much you're able to hold on that, and then continuously grow to the point where you can withdraw completely. It's not a what's a cold turkey approach to it, where you go to I want to set a goal, and from tomorrow everything changes. It doesn't change. You just relapse and you don't really attain much. So that's basically what I would like to share with regards to that. Someone else asked a question. I don't know whether you're seeing the questions too. You should. Aisha is
Yes.
asking, it's obvious you have some tips that guide you studying well, which led to a great achievement on your part. Do you mind sharing those tips?
Okay. Yeah, I can. So I, by nature, I guess something I discovered by nature when I moved here was I am a planner, right? Like started using like the calendar app on my phone. It first started as to, keep track of classes and meetings and, where the classes are and all that. Because I did have a bunch of like extracurricular involvement in school. And so, so I don't miss one of these or forget about it. So I was like using the calendar app on my phone to keep track of that. And then afterwards, it graduated into like, okay, well, I'm having classes, I'm having this. Actually, when am I going to study, right? And also like documenting that and like keeping track. So like it's like, oh, if I have class from here to here, if I have an exam next week, I should probably start, looking into, or it could be further than next week. But to be honest, I usually started studying the week before the exam. Not saying that it's a good habit, but it worked for me, right? So it's a personal thing. Some people take longer, need longer for the material they studied to really connect with it, and some people connect with it on a shorter basis. So I would say it also depends on like who you are as a person and what study style you have. But yeah, planning is something that helped me of like, okay, setting time aside to study. If it's like, oh, I need to get this homework done, this is the time I'm gonna do it from 4 to 6 p.m. today, and I'm gonna put some extra time in case I don't complete it or in case I get distracted during that window in case, something happens. Right? Kind of like allocating enough time for you to get work done or get studying done. But something that I also found to be very, very fundamental and very, very beneficial, I would say, and my second ending of my second year into college was studying with people. Like all through
Yeah.
growing up till then, like I've usually been a lone wolf. Like I study on my own, I get some studying done, I, go in and do that. But like I don't know, I just met a group of people who are studying, were in the same class, who were both, studying for the same exam. And it was a kind of difficult class. And so it really helped to have other people to bounce ideas off of. So we like did homeworks together, we sort of like talk through things together, talk through problems, talk through what was discussed in class together, and like sort of like, oh, if I didn't quite understand something, chances are there was one of the four people I was studying with who did understand that,
Who
and they
will
would
be
explain
able
that to
to?
me, right? And then there's one thing I did understand
Right.
or I'm familiar with that one of them don't understand, and well, sort of like a trade by barter with information and like sharing that, and I guess yeah, using that cycle.
Yeah. I think I know why that works because I think that generally you get better at things by teaching it. So you only
Also,
there's this quote, I can't remember exactly who said it, but it's like you can only know when you only know when you've known it, a certain concept, when you're able to explain to a layman in and they understand. And that means that you have to teach them exactly what you know. And if you're able to achieve that, that means you've been able to understand it at least to a certain extent. So I think that's the idea about sharing information with people or a group of people or studying with people that helps you understand or know things better. Um, yeah, and this is what I also like. I think of right. What you mentioned something that hit home with me is that I think everyone also has to be responsible, like sort of be honest with themselves in terms of what you need to be able to understand or assimilate things well. Over a couple of years where I see that people have varying levels of understanding. That is clear, but and sometimes it will take you a week to study for an exam. Sometimes it takes someone else a month to study for an exam. Um, the the idea is being honest with yourself and knowing how long does it take you and planning for that. I think that's what you said, and that should resonate with everyone. Should it's that you need to be able to identify how much time you need for you to prepare for, say, your classes, for your exams, for your assignment. You need to be able to be honest with yourself to evaluate that, and then use that as a tool to then better prepare yourself for whatever sort of assessment or preparations that you need to do for your classes. I think that's what I was able to get from that. I don't know if that was exactly what you were trying to say.
yes, that's probably what I was trying to say. But something else I just thought about now too is it also even depends on like I some classes are probably more difficult than other, or you can connect with some classes better than others. So because you need, let's say,
True,
4 hours, or you need to start studying for further maths, a month to the exam doesn't mean you need to do the same thing with English or something, right? So like you know,
true.
know those about different classes, or like some classes, easy peasy, right? To you, right? Because you understand the material better, maybe when it's being taught, or you just connect with it or can just understand it better. So there's also that distinction between like different classes and knowing how to identify that too.
True, true. That's good. So another question, Aisha. She says, Muzamil, there's no one sharing anything. That's Muzamil asking. But yeah, can you share some tips on how to put up with the negative energy, distractions, and comments people make and turn into something positive? I don't know whether I understand the question very well. Okay. How to turn negative energy into something positive? I think that's what she's trying to ask. Aisha, did we get your question correct? Okay, yeah, she said we got the question correct. So she's
Okay.
asking, how do you convert negative energy, distractions, and comments people make and turn them into something positive?
Um, to be honest,
And
some
yeah,
okay. I was gonna say something I've done or something that worked for me is just not focusing on it, right? Or giving any care attention. Like it depends, right? Because there's difference between like, helpful, effective feedback, or like, useful advice, and like just pure negative distractions, or like, hateful things, right? It depends on what these are. Um, for me, that is actually something I experienced growing up. Like I grew up the only girl with four boys. So like I did a bunch of things considered tomboyish, or, manly, of like, oh, I played soccer, I played basketball, I was interested in computer, I was interested in like computer classes. I remember even in IQ actually, I remember um it was like a distinction, like you had to choose between data processing at least during my year, you had to choose between data processing and I believe home economics. And like I was the only girl in the data processing class, and like all the boys were in data processing class, and that was something I was talked about. And like honestly, it was just something I decided or chose not to care about because like I would rather do data processing, and that's okay. Like no no one has the answers to everything, and there is no, oh, you can't do this because you're a girl, or you can't do this because something else. Like because there are probably also some stereotypes for boys too as well. So acknowledging that too is like, okay, like they can have their opinions, or whoever, wherever these comments, negative energy is coming from, like they can have their opinions, and that's fine. I just don't have to regard them as something I pay attention to or follow through with. Right? Like I can just do me. Like I can do what I want to do without paying mind. And that's also necessarily something like you can just turn on and off of, like, oh, today from now on, boom. Like it's something, at times you feel that, and then you have to like remind yourself and like come back to it of like, okay, why am I stressing about this? Like it really, these people's comments, this what negative energy really doesn't matter to me. And like just not giving it any mind. Because when you pay attention to it, when you give it that, you give it power. Because otherwise, like if they keep giving you things, the most powerful thing is, I remember this quote about how you can't control what people say or people do, but what you can control, what's entirely under your control, is how you
It's
react
how
to
you.
it.
Yeah,
Right. So I
true.
think taking 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 that into account and focusing on that is like, it doesn't matter what they do, right? I understand at times, like we're human beings, at times, it's gonna come true, or we're gonna be affected or be down by it. But like trying to remind yourself of like what matters is how I react to it. And if I don't react to it in the way they expect, or by giving it any mind, like I have the power and control over this. Like it really doesn't matter what it is or what they think in that sense.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's true. And I'm going to go a bit like philosophical in this, right? And how I look at it is this, and I know that there's an emotional part of you that you need to train to be strong enough to withstand all the energy that gets thrown at you from outside. And I think as you grow, you start to realize that um, the world in itself, there's going to be a lot of the good and then the bad. It's a weird balance between all of those things. You only know as good as things be, as things are rather, because you've seen how bad people are. So you can only appreciate how good comments are when you've actually heard a bad comments in a way. So you, in as much as you see good comments, it's going to come also that people wouldn't like or be excited by what you do. And your job is to be able to discern the difference between the two and know that, I mean, it is coming, it's going to come. It's not, I can't promise you that you grow in life. Aisha, that's if you're hearing that. I can't promise you that if you grow in life, people would stop saying hurtful comments. That's not possible. But you can grow a thick skin to know that when that comes, um, it's all part of your life's existence, and you cannot make that the core of who you are. You cannot make those comments the core of who you are, and you cannot make it have a power over you and on the long run. You just have to. It's something that you learn over time, but you can start to look at it from that perspective, and it will help you to become better at handling such emotional sort of I'll call it emotional energy or emotional response to things. And secondly, it's plus that fact that people, like people, I like to think that, right, how I to advise is that I like to think that when I meet people, I expect that you have some element of good in you and some element of bad. And then again, this is like something I learned over time. Like even when people say hurtful things, right, or as bad as they come, I don't think that's who they are. Also, that's also something that is quite like, it's quite funny, the weird balance. Sometimes people say things because of the circumstances surrounding maybe their personality, their experiences. A lot of things are a function of their life experiences. And I also think that they have some good in them. And the worst person to you today is an angel to their family. So you sort of grow to learn that anytime those things occur, you hear it. If there's anything that you need to action that you can take action from, say for example, someone says, "Oh, you're horrible," and then something, or maybe what you did is horrible. Maybe they're trying to tell you that it wasn't as good as it is. Maybe you all you need to do is look at what they're talking about. If there's actually something that you can take action from what their comment is, no matter how hurtful they've said it, pick that and ignore the rest of the comment, which is total malevolence, and then you go on with your life. Because again, like I said, sometimes people how people react is a function of how they've grown or their life experiences. And that's how I think that you can approach it. And there's going to always be that. And then there's always going to be good energy. There's going to be positive energy. I don't subscribe to the bad energy fire, go far away. I feel that you need them to grow. You need those people to tell you you can't do it so that you can prove them wrong. And so it's a weird balance. But yeah, that's how I like to look at it. If there are other questions, I think there's another question. Okay, yeah, and that boils down to Hassan asking, how can you deal with increasing your self-esteem and self-worth, improving yourself without feeling good enough for others? Uh,
I'm actually going to ask clarify the question. So is Hassan, please let me know if I'm understanding correctly. Is what you're asking like how do you deal with when you're improving yourself but you still don't feel like you are good enough for others? Is that the question?
I think she's asking whether without feeling. I think she's asking about how you don't feel good enough for others, but you're trying to improve yourself. Like people's perception of you seems like they don't feel that you're good enough, but you're trying to increase your self worth. And I don't know whether she's trying to increase her self worth because she wants to feel good enough for others. Can help us to highlight that. But I think self worth is an interesting conversation to have. Um, and you can talk about that. Like, do you have any sort of feeling where you don't feel? You've heard of this term before, imposter syndrome. So it's used by a lot of artists a lot, right? But I mean, the concept is also like it's also applicable to say your personal life. So you don't feel like worthy of the things that you have earned, and how do you deal with that on a normal daily basis? How do you handle that? While Hasana is trying to help us confirm the question that she asked.
Like, did you say I should
Hello?
answer that before she, or do we wait for her to
Yeah, yeah.
clarify that?
We're waiting for her to sort of.
Clarify. Okay.
Hasana, if you're here, help us clarify the question. I think yeah, she's here. Okay, oh, you're waiting for her to answer, right? Asha.
Okay. I can go ahead and answer the translation. So I guess the way I read it is how do you deal with increasing your self esteem and self worth? Like how do you improve yourself without feeling good enough for others? Um, One way to see this question is if you're asking like what do you do if you keep working on yourself and you're trying to improve, you're trying to grow, but with all this growth or with all this effort you're putting in, you still feel like you're not good enough for others. That's one way to interpret it, and I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to see if I can interpret it on that way and try to answer that in case that was the way she meant. Um,
Okay.
but for the first way of like doing things and improving yourself and not feeling good enough for others, um, honestly, I would say is to kind of shift focus again, right? Because it depends to what extent, right? Because it's one thing for you to be like, oh, I want to, do well in school and everything to make my parents proud, versus, oh, I want to, go to certain extreme lengths to like make someone happy, right? Or like to make or to feel good enough for someone. It's like I think like you should shift the focus to you and what makes you feel good in terms of like similarly how people say you're not in competition with others, you're in competition against yourself. of like, okay, well, you should be the one who rates your efforts and you should be the one who determines your worth. Like, I don't think self worth is something that should be placed in the hands of any other person but yourself, to be honest, because we're all human beings, right? You can't trust human beings. Like, someone can see you as this magnificent person, and then someone else is like, no matter what you do, like, no matter, come, come heaven, come sunshine, like, no matter what you do, like, someone is still going to be like, oh, that's not enough or like that. And if you are in this mindset of like, oh, I have to keep pleasing this person, like, you're gonna burn out. Like you are just literally gonna burn out trying to,
bẹ́ẹ̀ ni,
appeal to this person or feel or
bẹ́ẹ̀
do
ni,
something that you feel is worthy enough for this person. And you don't know, they might have impossibly high standards, right?
bẹ́ẹ̀
But again, this is a different situation from, if it's,
bẹ́ẹ̀ ni,
let's say your parents or something, wanting like the bare minimum of like, oh yeah, do well in school, right? Or like do average in school. Like there are differences between like, oh, I'm doing this completely, or I'm not meeting standards like regular standards or achieve standards that even I can meet, right? And there's a difference between like going above and beyond or trying to go to impossible standards to meet up with a specific person or maybe even society in general too, right? So I would honestly say like the one person you should trust with that is you. Like you have the executive decision, you have the knowledge on like what the specific instance is, and like trust yourself to make that call of like, okay, am I up to par as to what I can be, right? Of like, am I, am I doing well based on my standards? Can I be doing better? Can I improve myself better for myself, right? Versus can I improve myself better for Mr. A or Mrs. A or like somebody, right? Like, can I do improve myself better for myself? Because like in the long run, like you are the best sense of job. Like you have all the background knowledge. You know the effort you've put into things, right? You know the perception. You have knowledge of your experiences. Like you have all this knowledge about why things are the way they are, right? And someone can just come from this thing with no idea about who you are and be like, oh, this shouldn't have happened or this should have been this, right? But they are not quite in a position to judge or to have that input or to have that authority over your life. Um, did you have anything to add on top of that, Uncle Salim?
Uh, yeah, because self-worth is okay. So I was actually thinking what you were saying because I understand the self-worth question is easy to answer. Say 5, 10 years ago when there wasn't so much scrutiny
Social
on
media?
people's perception of people's perception of me. So for example,
no, no, no,
10 years ago, before the advent of the current technologies that we have today, you could go ahead and maybe give yourself goals and then you achieve that and then it's fine. And then you're hopeful that maybe you've been able to move forward a little bit in life. But nowadays, the reason why it's hard for everyone to sort of why the self-worth question is so pertinent now is because everyone sees everything. So you see and all you see is just a snapshot of everybody's life. So you see Instagram, you see Twitter, you see Facebook, and all you see is all the good news and all um the perception that people have curated. I like the word curated, right? And usually when you curate something, you sort of like pick on the good things that you want to show and then you like ignore all the bad things. And then we are sort of striving for that high standard that is unattainable that nobody is telling us about, and that's why the self worth is such a hard question. And a lot of students these days, or a lot of people growing up in this era, are going to have a lot of that to battle with or to contend with in the future. So it's kind of like a very strong question of self worth when she was asking, and that was what I was thinking of it. But how I would like to think of it is that um, everybody has like you said, it's about you. You be the judge and jury of your actions. I like the word responsibility. So sort of like you're responsible for all the things that you're doing. So you think of what have I done? What are the things that I'm supposed to be doing as my personal obligation to myself? How have I been able to achieve that? How have I been able to pull through on some of the promises I made to myself? Emphasis on myself. And and then sometimes you also need to see that you also need the reminder because some people don't even know. We need to remind ourselves that all we see in our environment in the social media space isn't as it is. Life is pretty much complex, right? So if someone tells you, "Oh wow, at 20, or 21, or at 20." to have everything figured out. They won't tell you how much things that they had to go through. They won't tell you how much experiences that they went through, how much certain consequences or certain experiences, certain things put all of these things in place. So, and we leave all these parts of the stories away. We leave it away, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to sort of achieve the unachievable realistically, and that's how I like to see. So, give yourself the responsibility of judging your actions and leave all the chatter about whether you're good enough for someone else to leave it away from the conversation. Just keep on with the fact that you set goals for yourself, achieve those goals, and give yourself the responsibility of evaluating those goals. I, I, it's not something we can converse and finish in a sitting. I don't know whether you get it. It's not something we can converse and finish in a sitting. Self worth is going to be a conversation that is going to constantly be evolving. People are going to learn how to grow self worth through the age of the internet that we're growing in. And we're going to have to deal with that on the long run. But on the short run, simple answer is that you are responsible for yourself. Nobody is. Um, Not even your friends, not even your family to an extent, but in the intrinsic, every action you make, you bear the responsibility to yourself, and then you have to really, really use that as a yardstick to judge yourself. Not social media, not this very flashy appearance of the internet that you see, or a flashy representation of yourself that everyone sees. Um, yeah, and that's what I think. I think it's a conversation that is long, and I don't want to get into too much detail so that we don't bore people here. But Hassan, I don't know if you understood what we asked. I think she's left or what. Yeah, she's still there. Um, that's that. I mean, if
Yeah,
anybody else has questions, oh yeah, you were about to say something. Let me get.
I was gonna touch on that. Like that's a really good point of like social media and like comparing things. And I feel like personally something that's helped me is just that constant reminder of like things are not what they say. Right? Someone posting, oh, I just got this new car at 20, blah blah blah. It's like I don't know the full story, and that's all I know. Like they got this new car at 20 because that's all they said. But I don't know the full story. For all I know, parents could have bought it for them, right? She could have had rich parents who bought it for them, or it could have been a thing of a work thing. Like I guess my point is like there's always so much more, especially like in certain countries, because things are not always as they appear. Like you bought this car at 20, but lots of people do this thing where they pay down payment and they're doing like monthly payments, and then there's
Yeah,
interest
for
on top of
years.
it. And so it's like, okay, yeah, okay, you bought this car at 20, but I could have done
Yeah,
that if
you're
I
still.
wanted to. It's not necessarily a financially wise decision, in my opinion, but the way you flash it out, it's like, well, it's this fancy thing of like, I was able to do this thing, which is good and fine if you're proud of it. Like, I don't know what you're or where you're coming from too of that. So, not just saying things and throwing a certain value to it of like, oh, this person was able to do this and I wasn't able to do that. It's like, not all, um, not all things are cut equal. So, like, don't,
Yeah, there's
yeah,
basically there's always a full story to, and
there's
that's
always a full
it,
story to it and
omitted.
it's never on there.
Yeah, and the problem again that I find is, and this is just talking of sort of because the problem again that we're finding is, um, so what these technologies have afforded us a very good Twitter, for example, allows us to have conversations, right? Um, Instagram allows us to share visual explore, like just it's just a visual exploration tool. So you see a lot of imagery and you're somewhat stimulating imagery. Facebook allows us to, connect with family members, with friends, and all of these things. But the downside to them is that some of these things are incomplete on their own. So Twitter is about how many characters now? Maybe 280, right? And so
Tourism.
there isn't so much that can be said in 280 characters about things, about experiences. Maybe you have a thread, but we have such a short attention span that we don't even have that much time. So all we see is a snapshot of that conversation, that quote, that this and that. And a lot of people have taken advantage of that to further their own careers. So, all these influencers have used that as a very strong tool. So you see an influencer at 20, so, and he's saying, oh yeah, I have this and that. I have a house of my own. I have this, have that, that on social media, and then you're giving yourself this much pressure. Like, how do I achieve that at 20? But because this man wouldn't tell you that, oh, probably I have a very strong connection to this, or I have a very strong help from this person, or I have that, I have this, I have that. So all of these things aren't told to everyone. And the reality is, we all need to know that the full story is not being told on all of these platforms, or and nobody's going to tell the full story. Even Mark Zuckerberg wouldn't tell the full story. Like, they'll tell you as much as they want you to know, but you need to know that there's a lot behind the curtains, and that everybody's story is, is only as good as their. Everything that they say, everything everyone says is as good as um, how much backstory behind it. And if you don't know that much, you can't put yourself on that under that impression that you want to do exactly what they. And it's not even. It's very impossible. It's very much not possible to like do exactly as someone else has done. So it's just like a fool's journey if you're trying to do that. So I'd like for us to know that, because it helps to temper your expectations with reality, right? And and go through it. You're going is an experience, and I was speaking to someone. Sorry for taking this. Like, I was speaking to someone earlier today, and she was like, "Oh, how do you figure out what you have to do in life?" And my simple answer to that was more or less like, sometimes the circumstances surrounding your life journey is so funny in such a way that every action you take is going to be different. And I said to her that just know that you have to start small. You have to start badly. You have to start horribly. You have to try things out sometimes. Now, not trying haphazardly, but you have to try with the hope that you plan it out, but then you try it. But you know deep down in your head, like at the back of your mind, you know that sometimes some of these things you try wouldn't work out. Right? But it's a journey that you have to take to be able to find out where you need to get to. But yeah, you have to be like meticulous about it. You have to plan it out. But the idea is the journey isn't set in stone. You can't sit down and say, "This is how I'm going to plan every single step of the way," and it works out that way. It generally doesn't work that way. The world will throw in curveballs. It will throw in these different obstacles that you need to evaluate yourself and then overcome yourself. And that's how you generally go through life. So I want you all to, I think that might help someone who needs um, that sort of advice. I have a question for you though. Um, the question is, okay, I think it was you talked about you interned at three places, right? Was that was that when you were in school? Was that a recommend? Was it a recommendation from your school? Or let's say, for example, was that expected of you, or you did it on your own volition?
Gotcha. That's a good question. It's definitely like a common thing for students in the US to intern in college. It's not like a requirement, like I didn't need it to graduate. Like I could have gone to and not interned and graduated just fine. But it's definitely something that is very heavily recommended, especially in the sense of
Yeah.
how much impact it has with you getting a job after graduation, right? Because like I can't even stress enough how valuable internships are, at least in this like ecosystem, right? In the sphere of the US, where there are opportunities or more opportunities to get relevant experience. Because what happened was I had my first internship with a software company in Massachusetts, and my second internship in some ways. Because I remember during the interview question, they were asking some questions of like, "Oh, how have you worked in a team?" And "Oh, I see you worked at this place. What was something?" They asked about those my experiences, and that was, I believe, some part of the reason what sold them, to my second internship, which was the one at Twitter last summer. And I got my full time job intern there. They like having me on board, they had space and all that, and they made it happen, and I came full time to work. Then I think that just makes it a bit more difficult to be employed in the sense of like you number one, there's that worry of like, okay, do you even have relevant experience? Yes, you've gone through school and they've taught you, how to do XYZ, but I feel like with internship, it's a lot more than just the theoretical or even the practical nature of doing it. Like there's a lot.
Yeah, true. It's it's important that in the climb, I think, and even anywhere, I think it's and wait, question is, were you paid in your internships? Was it like a paid internship or was it
Yes, it was.
because
They were
again,
all paid internships.
yeah,
Um,
because again, I think a lot yeah, because again, I think a lot of things that might throw people off is maybe when they think, oh yeah, it's an internship and I don't get paid. But I think, what would you say to that? Even if you're not getting paid, would that be a good would that still be a good option for someone to do?
I think it honestly, I would say depends on circumstances. So like let me tell you specific details about my and why it wasn't, or I felt it wouldn't be a good option to not get paid for the work I was doing. So mine is like number one, location based. I'm in the United States, right? Unpaid internships happen,
Sure,
they're not necessarily the norm, but they're available out there, right? I think I went and encountered one. I like went into an interview and they mentioned it was unpaid, at some point. But so yeah, in the US, number two is I'm studying computer engineering, which is like a heavily sought out field, right? It's something where I provide value for the company during that time, even during the short time I'm there. So like, and these are software companies who make, lots of money based on, the value you provide. So like, I know for a fact, like, you're helping them make money. And so I guess it really just ultimately depends on like a bunch of circumstances like that of like, okay, what are the available options, right? If all there was in the field of software engineering, or I guess computer engineering that I was doing were unpaid internships, then yeah, it might be worth considering like, oh, gaining the experience and then using that experience from an unpaid internship to leverage a full-time job where I do get paid. Right. But if there are tons of opportunities where they do pay you to do the work and you still get experience, it feels, kind of like a knockoff to then do the work and not get experience. Also depends, right? Because
sure,
if you're like, let's say, working for a non-profit who genuinely, or a startup that genuinely kind of want to pay you and it's something you're really passionate about, right? This is something like you want to do, like you would rather do this and not get paid than do something else and get paid for it. It really just depends on you and like what you want in that sense of some people are passionate about certain things and are willing to go to bat for it, and some people um don't necessarily have a preference. It's like, oh, I just want experience in general, right? Relevant experience in general. I don't mind, I don't want it. I don't want the specific opportunity enough to not get paid for it. Um, and it depends on the field too.
sure.
Like, are there paid internship positions for that specific field you're in? If there are, then maybe consider looking into a paid internship position.
True. I think yeah, it's true. I think it's I think it's true that you should. It is circumstances that would determine whether you go for it. Obviously, you want to get paid for work because you're providing value, and especially if your field is sort of heavily sought out
Yeah.
field, right? But I mean, I generally think that this is my thoughts generally, right? I think that iris because again, well, like I like to think that irrespective to look at it from, because I'm also looking at it from this climb that we were talking from, and so you have to look at it from the perspective of what are you gaining and what are you losing. So if you evaluate both those two, if you weigh those two and say I'm gaining experience, which is invaluable, and people are going to ask about this, and I'm going to put it in my resume. If I can afford to go unpaid,
Unpaid.
again,
Okay.
it's all about circumstances.
If you can
If you
afford
can
to.
afford to
That's a
go,
good point.
if you can afford to, that's a very strong statement. If you can afford it, so maybe you have parents that can still handle your transport or whatnot, then by all means do it. Like it's something that you would add to your resume. They won't say, oh, because you didn't get paid, you can add it to your resume or CV. So you just have to wait, right? And then say, okay, fine. And and you have to make sure you're doing it for the right reason so that it doesn't burn you out so quickly. Um, so I think we've been able to learn a few things here and there. In the absence of I think there are no more questions. I think it's been a very um, interesting session. I don't know if I sort of enjoyed the conversation. I don't know if other people also have shared the uh, same thoughts that I have, but I really did enjoy it, and I think that your questions came in handy. Thank you for your time, Aisha. We really do appreciate um, your presence here. And I think that if you want to, if you think, I don't know if this is comfortable, I'd like to say that if any of the students who are here today want to sort of maybe have a personal conversation with
Reach
Aisha,
out.
you can
Yeah.
feel free to, yeah, you can reach out to her, and then she probably be in the best position to give you personal, one-on-one advice that you might not want to ask in the group session that we're having today. Um, we would have to end this now. If you have anything or a thing or two to say, so before we end this, I'd like to hear that.
Are you asking for like from the audience or from me?
Yeah, from you, from you.
Oh, for me, no, nothing much more. I would just say, thank you all for having me and for, you know, um, asking the questions. They're all, in my opinion, really good, interesting question that sparked conversations. And yeah, thank you for being attentive.
Yeah,
Also,
definitely.
I will give my contact to Sharifa, and if anyone has questions or want to reach me, you know, contact her, and she, she's free to give my contact to any one of you who needs it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think we'll continue this tomorrow at 11. Yeah, we should be continue tomorrow. We'll hope to see you tomorrow if you have the time. Well, I guess you probably wouldn't, but even if you can, that would be great. So for the others that are joining us today, tomorrow by 11, we'll have the same session with another person, and then they'll be sharing some of their tips and ideas with us so that we can use them and hopefully be able to, um, you know, be able to forge a new way forward for ourselves, right? Thank you very much for all coming and have a nice day. Uh, bye for everyone. Bye. I'll see you
Bye.
Thank you
tomorrow, like
very
I
much,
said.
Aisha. Thank
Assalamu
you.
alaikum.
Wa alaikum
Wa
salam.
alaikum salam
Jazakumullah
wa
khairan.
rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you.
No worries, no. Yeah, thank you for reaching out. All right.
Bye.
Why did you everything? These things.